Bun găsit la o nouă ediție a Săptămânii Europene. Avem noutăți interesante, așa că vă propun ca în următoarea jumătate de oră să rămâneți alături de mine și să vedem ce se mai întâmplă pe bătrânul continent. Să-i dăm drumul. Parlamentele naționale au avut parte de mult așteptata vacanță de vară, la fel și cel european. Eurodeputații s-au întors la muncă, sperăm că și cu forțe proaspete. Nu de alta, dar scandalurile ce au zguduit în acest an întreaga Europa împreună cu criza economică ne-au făcut parcă să-i trimitem într-un concediu forțat. Bineînțeles, unul în care să-și adune forțele pentru a pune umărul spre rezolvarea unui impas moral, financiar și social. Care este direcția în care va merge Uniunea Europeană de acum încolo? Ce soluții va lua pentru a combate instabilitatea economică ce planează asupra fiecărui stat membru? Cine și mai ales ce a decis în această vară? La toate aceste întrebări veți găsi răspunsul în următoarele minute, într-un material realizat de partenerii noștri de la Bruxelles.
Hello and welcome to 7 Days in Europe. My guest is the leader of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, Belgian MEP Guy Verhofstadt. Shortly we'll be taking a look back at the summer's news and ahead to the next plenary session, but we start with our Yes/No segment. Here, for 1 minute, I'm going to pose some series of questions here, to which I want you to answer a simple yes or no without elaborating any further. Is the European economy in serious trouble?
No.
What about the Belgian economy? Is the Belgian economy in
the Belgian
trouble?
economy is doing it well. More than 1.7% of economic growth in the first part of the year.
Would it be doing better if you were in charge of it?
I think it's doing it very well because also of the enormous growth of the German economy. And as you know, the Belgian economy is really very close to the German.
What about those who say that it would be better to let a country like Greece default in a structured way? Would you say yes or no to that?
I think that should be a very bad solution. The better solution is a solution inside the framework of the euro.
Do you still support Eurobonds as a way of raising funds?
I think it's the best way to tackle this crisis, yeah.
Looking back to what happened in Libya, do you feel that Europe had enough presence during what was happening there?
Well, I think it's because of Europe that we stopped the military forces of Gaddafi near to Benghazi, yes, thanks to Britain and to France.
Do you feel that Catherine Ashton had enough to say during that crisis?
I don't think so. She has been always waiting for unanimity within the Council of Foreign Affairs Ministers, and that's not a good way to tackle the problems.
Will Belgium have a stable government without another election?
I think so. They are now really negotiating, so I hope so.
OK, that's enough of that then. We'll move on now with a look back at some of the key stories over the summer with Christophe Garrasch.
Été 2011, l'été de tous les dangers pour la zone euro, crise de la dette, bourse en chute libre, panne de croissance. L'été n'avait pourtant pas trop mal commencé pour la monnaie unique. C'était le 21 juillet à Bruxelles. Après des heures de négociations, les chefs d'État de la zone euro se mettent enfin d'accord sur un nouveau plan d'aide à la Grèce. La Grèce par qui la crise de la dette est arrivée. La réponse des marchés financiers tombe très vite. Le nouveau plan de sauvetage de la Grèce ne les a pas convaincus. L'incendie reprend de plus belle, en cause cette fois les mauvaises nouvelles venues des États-Unis. Crise de la dette américaine, croissance en baisse. Les experts craignent désormais la récession. Le 16 août, le couple franco-allemand se réunit en urgence à Paris. Nicolas Sarkozy et Angela Merkel relancent l'idée d'un véritable gouvernement de la zone euro. Mais rien n'y fait, les bourses sont de nouveau chahutées et la Banque Centrale Européenne doit de nouveau jouer les pompiers. Dernier épisode de ce feuilleton de l'été, une réunion de crise le 29 août à Bruxelles, cette fois devant les eurodéputés. Pour Jean-Claude Trichet, il est urgent que les États adoptent enfin le plan de sauvetage de la Grèce, négocié en juillet dernier. Cela pourrait calmer les marchés. Autre priorité pour les eurodéputés, l'adoption rapide des nouvelles règles destinées à renforcer la gouvernance économique. Problème, les négociations sont restées bloquées tout l'été, en cause notamment la France et l'Allemagne qui tardent à lâcher du lest. Des bougies et des larmes pour la Norvège. Ces images tournent en boucle sur Internet. Le 22 juillet, un déséquilibré est arrêté après avoir fait exploser une bombe dans le centre d'Oslo, tuant 7 personnes. L'homme est également à l'origine d'un véritable massacre perpétré sur l'île d'Utøya. Le bilan est terrifiant, 77 morts au total, dont une grande majorité de jeunes Norvégiens assassinés de sang-froid. Les reporters du monde entier étaient aux premières loges pour assister en direct à la fin du régime Kadhafi en Libye. Au terme d'intenses combats, les rebelles libyens sont parvenus à libérer Tripoli avec l'aide de l'OTAN et de ses experts militaires envoyés sur place. Reste maintenant à l'Union européenne à accompagner la Libye de l'après-Kadhafi.
Just a reminder, you're watching 7 Days in Europe. My studio guest is Guy Verhofstadt. Looking at the first story that was covered there, the euro crisis, it hasn't gone away over the summer, and indeed the rescue package dreamed up by Mrs Merkel and Mr Sarkozy doesn't seem to have met universal approval.
No, because these measures that they have taken are measures that are not convincing for the markets. For the market, it's very clear what we need in Europe is an economic and fiscal union. Besides the existing monetary union. We are the only people in the world who think that you can have one monetary union and 17 governments, 17 bond markets and 70 different economic policies. So this euro crisis is only over when we have the courage to create this economic and fiscal union.
It has been said that what Europe really needs is a finance ministry of its own that looks after all of the member countries. Would that help?
That would help, and that's totally different from the decision and the proposal that has been made by Merkel and Sarkozy. They are proposing to have a council of the 17 heads of states and heads of governments of the Eurozone 2 times a year. That's not a government, in my opinion. A government is meeting each other 2 times a week, but not 2 times a year. So a better proposal should be to reorganize the European Commission and to ask to the Commission responsible for economic and monetary affairs also to chair the Eurogroup and at the same time to be this minister for the Euro and the Eurozone.
Wouldn't that require, though, changes to the treaty, and remembering how difficult it is to get any sort of changes to the treaty?
I don't think that treaty changes are necessary, because you have Article 134 and 136 of the treaty, which is saying very clearly that the Union can take all necessary measures to stabilize and to guarantee the stability of the euro.
Looking at one of the other stories there, this dreadful incident in Norway over the summer, of course, we have seen a rise of populist politics and politicians looking for simple solutions to what are perceived as problems. Is there a way to fight that?
Yeah, I think there's a way to fight it, and that's to be very clear and to express a clear vision, European vision, to the peoples of Europe. What we see today is this rise of populism and nationalism in Finland, in Sweden, Norway, Denmark also, even in France, the Netherlands, Hungary, and so on and so on. So the only way to tackle that are European leaders who are really showing a European vision and a future, a common future for the European continent. And that is lacking for the moment. What the most of the political leaders are doing, they are simply copying the populist parties. But as you know, people like more the original than the copy.
Just looking at the final story, the Libyan story there, do we actually know who's actually now running Libya? We know that the council has taken over, but is it a real government? What are its politics?
It's a real government, and I can tell you also with very competent people. The European Parliament was the first institution in the European Union to invite Mr. Jibril, who is the Prime Minister of the Transitional Council, and everybody was very impressed by his capacity, by the competence, and let's hope that it is not the end of the story, but that we help Libya now and that we continue to fight also for the case in Syria, because there is still an internal war going on in Syria. And we have to say that the European Union is not doing enough. Cathy Ashton is not doing enough to impose sanctions to a high number of officials of Syria. And secondly, there is still a problem on the oil embargo. We have decided an oil embargo, and there are still problems to have unanimity in the Council on that.
Well, the summer's now behind us, and we can now look ahead to some of the events to come with a packed agenda in store for the first of the European Parliament's 2 September plenary sessions in Strasbourg. Caroline Grasso explains.
Bonjour Monsieur Verhofstadt, bonjour Jim. Ça repart sur les chapeaux de roue au Parlement européen avec le premier grand dossier de la rentrée, le vote sur le paquet gouvernance économique. Il contient 6 réformes avec lesquelles les eurodéputés tenteront de formuler une réponse européenne à la crise de la dette et de la zone euro. Certains préconisent la rigueur, d'autres voudraient au contraire miser sur la croissance. Réponse lors du vote en session plénière le 14 septembre. Et ce jour-là, il sera également question du budget 2012 de l'Union. La Commission européenne et le Parlement voudraient une augmentation de 4,9%. Pas évident en période de restriction budgétaire, car les États membres misent, eux, sur la prudence. Côté franco-allemand, on propose le gel du budget, c'est-à-dire 1% du PIB européen, soit 126 milliards d'euros. Également au menu ce mois-ci, la réforme de Frontex, l'agence européenne en charge de la surveillance des frontières extérieures de l'Union. Pour mémoire, il y avait déjà eu un accord en juillet dernier entre les députés chargés du dossier et le Conseil. Objectif, renforcer les pouvoirs de Frontex. Vote le 13 septembre. Côté social, cette fois, une nouvelle Euro-manifestation est prévue le 17 septembre en Pologne. Mot d'ordre, oui à la solidarité, à l'emploi et aux droits des travailleurs, et non à l'austérité. Culture. Les films des 3 finalistes en compétition pour le prix Luxe seront diffusés au Festival de la Mostra de Venise qui se tient jusqu'au 10 septembre. Et enfin, sur le slogan Jeunes volontaires Stand Up, le Parlement européen accueillera du 7 au 11 septembre des concerts, des conférences et des ateliers. Objectif, sensibiliser les jeunes au travail bénévole dans le cadre de l'année européenne du volontariat. Alors, au travail.
Guy Verhofstadt, what do you see as the biggest problems that are likely to crop up at the first September session, the first one after the rentrée?
The biggest issue is certainly the six-pack, so the package on economic governance, because we need this six-pack the fastest as possible, but there is still a difficult problem to solve a dispute between the European Council on the one side and the European Parliament. And that's on the issue, who is really in the driver's seat? Is it the member states who shall penalize themselves, or is it the European Central Bank and the European Commission? And in the opinion of the European Parliament, it's impossible to strengthen the Stability Pact and to continue to have the member states in the driver's seat of the whole process, because member states don't penalize themselves when they are not fulfilling the conditions of the Stability Pact. It didn't happen in the past.
Yeah, we saw this happen when France and Germany breached the last Stability Pact.
Exactly, and they changed simply the Stability Pact to change the conditions. So it is not, in my opinion, credible for the financial markets to vote this package of economic governance without this fundamental change. And the fundamental change to achieve, in the opinion of the Parliament, is that also in the so-called preventive arm, the European Commission can launch a number of measures, and that only a reversed majority of member states can block that.
So you see that would be the way forward, it can happen?
I think so. And secondly, there is also a discussion on Eurobonds, because the European Parliament asked that the European Commission come forward with an initiative, with at least an analysis, so that we can introduce in the near future these Eurobonds.
Guy Verhofstadt, thanks very much indeed. Well, we move on now with the second part of today's programme, a new subject and indeed a different guest too. The subject, of course, is the reform of the Common Fisheries Policy, and my guest is a Vice-Chair of the Fisheries Committee, Scottish MEP Struan Stevenson. Well, let's start with a report on the proposed reforms from Gaël Le Fischer.
Du matin, port de Boulogne-sur-Mer, nord de la France. Les seuls moteurs qui tournent sont ceux des fileyeurs, des bateaux de moins de 12 mètres qui partent avec la marée et font plonger leurs 8 km de filets pas très loin des côtes. À bord du fileyeur Jérémy Florent, on sait beaucoup de choses grâce ou à cause des réglementations européennes. La zone de pêche, les pourcentages de poissons que l'on peut attraper, le temps que ça va prendre. Mais il y a une chose que le patron de pêche ignore, c'est si ses enfants feront encore ce métier-là dans 10 ans.
On veut faire une politique pour sauver la pêche. Et moi j'ai l'impression qu'on fait tout pour nous éliminer. Hein. On a fait ce métier-là par passion, parce qu'on l'aime. On aime la mer, on aime la liberté et tout. Et aujourd'hui, tout ça c'est parti. Aujourd'hui, vous êtes dans un carcan administratif, des lois, des mesures techniques, des quotas.
Chez les Lomel, comme chez la cinquantaine de fileyeurs de Boulogne, la pêche est une histoire de famille. Une histoire sur laquelle Christophe Lomel aimerait bien que Bruxelles s'attarde un peu plus.
Moi, j'ai jamais vu personne de Bruxelles venir à bord de mon bateau dire à Monsieur Lomel, on va faire une année avec vous, on va vous observer pendant une année. Moi, je serais tout à fait d'accord.
À partir de janvier prochain, le ton va se durcir. Un permis à points va être mis en place pour pénaliser les pêcheurs d'Europe qui ne respectent pas les réglementations. Dans la région de Boulogne, tout le monde est contre. Que faire par exemple du poisson qui rentre dans leur filet, mais qu'ils n'ont pas le droit de pêcher?
Donc là, le résultat de la pêche. Donc si je respectais la loi aujourd'hui, il faudrait que je jette la moitié du coffre de plis.
Pourquoi?
Parce que j'ai 25 kilos de sol, donc j'ai le droit qu'à qu'à 30% d'espèces non ciblées. Tout ce qu'il y a dans le coffre est jeté par-dessus le bar. J'ai pas l'impression qu'avec 2 coffres de poissons, j'ai vidé la mer.
Alors qu'est-ce que vous allez faire?
Qu'est-ce que je vais faire? Je vais les débarquer quand même, malgré que je suis en fraude, parce que j'ai plus de poissons.
La femme de Christophe Lomel, elle, préfère rester à quai. Comme pas mal de femmes de filayeurs, elle tient un étal où se vend une partie de la pêche du jour. Le reste part à la criée. Des poissonniers de Paris se déplacent jusqu'à Boulogne. Ils disent que le poisson y est moins cher. Sur les quais d'en face commence un autre monde, celui des chalutiers. Une 50aine sur Boulogne. Celui-ci est en réparation. Après, il ne reprendra pas la mer pour autant, car le bateau est en repos biologique pour 2 semaines. Objectif visé par Bruxelles, laisser reposer les fonds marins pour favoriser la reproduction du poisson.
Le système d'arrêt temporaire, c'est pas ce qu'il y a de mieux, je pense pas. Hein. Ou alors il faudrait que ça se fasse partout en Europe.
Des bateaux à l'arrêt en partie subventionnés par l'Union européenne. Jusqu'à 30-35% maximum de la flottille peut rester à quai sans que la filière soit menacée.
Quand il y a un problème au niveau gestion quota, on ne nous écoute jamais, on n'écoute que les scientifiques. Et ça, c'est un problème. Et ils ne sont pas assez réactifs. Quand on constate en mer, par exemple, je reprends l'exemple du cabillaud, il y a du cabillaud, on ne l'invente pas, c'est bien une réalité, c'est la réalité du terrain, c'est bien ce qui se passe. Pourquoi on ne vient pas voir avec nous sur le terrain pour constater, plutôt que de rester derrière un ordinateur en disant non, d'après mes calculs, c'est pas possible.
Un des baromètres de la santé du port de Boulogne, c'est ce chantier naval, présent depuis presque 100 ans. Ici aussi, on a senti la crise. Beaucoup moins de bateaux de pêche sont construits chaque année. Et pourtant...
Il y a eu une sélection naturelle qui s'est faite. Et aujourd'hui, on est plutôt, je dirais, dans vraiment des professionnels, des gens qui ont su passer toutes les étapes de ces critères qui ont pénalisé un peu la construction. Et aujourd'hui, on peut être plus serein quant à l'avenir.
La réforme de la pêche européenne est lancée. Le défi est de taille. Il va falloir repeupler les mers, protéger l'industrie de la pêche, tout en prenant en compte la demande des consommateurs en constante augmentation.
Stuart Stevenson, you've been involved in the reform process all the way through. Do you feel that it is going in the right direction, bearing in mind that now 14 of the 27 member states, for instance, have asked for subsidies to continue?
I don't think it's going in the right direction at all. You know, we have an opportunity here for a radical reform. And when the Commission published their proposal, 6 different reports were delivered to the Fisheries Committee in July. And frankly, I said at the time, they promised us a whale and they delivered us with a sardine. It's really a missed opportunity. And partly, I understand, the reason is the legal people in the Commission have been arguing this is a common policy and it must, the power must be retained by Brussels. Now, of course, Mrs. Damanaki, the Commissioner, has been agreeing with us. Our criticism for years has been that the micromanagement from the European Commission in the heart of Brussels has wrecked the fisheries sector across the whole of Europe. And she agrees with this. And we have said the only way to resolve this is use the opportunity of the reform for devolving management, day-to-day management, back to the member states.
But she's been up against her own officials, hasn't she, here? Because the Commission doesn't want to yield power.
Well, exactly. The Commissioner is saying the treaty embrace the power structure based in Brussels. And even although our micromanagement has wrecked fisheries, we intend to continue micromanagement and presumably continue to wreck the whole fisheries sector. So that's no solution.
The aim is total sustainable yield by 2015. We're not going to get there, are we?
Well, we're nowhere near getting there right now. Now, I accept that that is a viable ambition, and that's something that we should really all be trying to achieve, because if we do achieve maximum sustainable yield, which means fish catching only the amount of stock that allows the rest of the stock to continue replenishing itself, continue to breed, in other words, you have a sustainable fishery which will increase jobs in the sector, increase profitability, so it would be a win-win situation for everyone. So that is something we should try and achieve, but we're not going to do it so long as we continue dumping 750,000 tonnes of perfectly good fish dead over the side every year.
Well, of course, one of the aims is to try to reduce the discards. I mean, there are people campaigning for no discard at all, but in fact, even that is not sustainable, is it? There are people looking at simplistic answers and slogans here.
Well, you know, if it was simple to resolve the situation of discards, we who've been working on this issue for years would have done it a long time ago. suddenly along comes a famous celebrity chef from the UK with a big TV program, and 600,000 people sign a petition in one member state, and the Commission panics, and suddenly we are being rushed into a land-all policy.
But that would be bad for the Nethrops fishery.
Well, of course it would. I mean, right now, if you catch young Nethrops, or if you're not even fishing for Nethrops, for prawns and shrimps, and you happen to catch them, you throw them back alive. If we force fishermen to land everything, we'll actually be killing more prawns than ever before, and that's not sustainable.
So,
to be fair, the Commission have said in their policy that there will be derogations.
Voluntariatul este fără îndoială cea mai nobilă meserie din lume. Ați dedica munca în folosul celorlalți fără a pretinde merite financiare sau materiale este mai presus de orice funcție de prim rang. Tocmai de aceea voluntariatul este și vedeta acestui an. Pentru a marca 10 ani de la inițiativa Națiunilor Unite, Uniunea Europeană a decretat 2011 ca fiind anul voluntariatului. Sincronizarea ironică a acestei celebrări cu foametea fără precedent din Africa a dat parcă o și mai mare amploare voluntariatului. Mii de oameni din întreaga lume și-au abandonat confortul de acasă și au zburat către cel mai bătut de soartă loc de pe întreaga planetă. Desigur, seceta din Africa nu este singura cauză care necesită implicarea activă și susținută. Dacă ne uităm în jur, sunt o mulțime de oameni care au nevoie de ajutorul nostru, de atenția noastră, de câteva ore de dedicare pentru un scop, până la urmă nobil. Vă încurajez să vă gândiți la cei din jur, la felul în care îi puteți ajuta și să căutați organizații în care vă puteți înscrie pentru a construi, cărămidă cu cărămidă, un loc mai bun pentru noi toți. Până atunci vreau să vă dau exemplul unei tânăre din Marea Britanie, care se implică în comunitate ca voluntar cu normă întreagă pentru ca oamenii mai în vârstă să poată folosi calculatorul. O cauză nu atât de importantă, ați putea spune, în comparație cu tragediile care au loc pe plan internațional. Și totuși cineva se ocupă și de acest aspect minor. În reportajul care urmează vom vedea și cum susține Parlamentul European această nouă categorie de muncitori în folosul comunității.
This week, Parliament near you visits the European Parliament Information Office in London, which is organising a conference on volunteering. Guest speakers include Irish MEP Marian Harkin and experts from related organisations. 2011 is the European Year of Volunteering. We're going to meet Tina, a young woman from the UK. Just like her, 6,400 young people tried their hand at volunteering in the European Voluntary Service Programme in 2010. Let's go to the British capital to focus in on a concept which is inspiring more and more young Europeans.
Hello, my name is Tina. I'm 23 years old and I'm a full-time volunteer with Community Service Volunteers. I am recently a psychology graduate. When I finished university, like many graduates today, there is lack of opportunity for employment, or there is far too much competition. So you need to find a way of setting yourself apart from others. So volunteering for me is something I hadn't done before and wanted to do. As a full-time volunteer, I was thinking, where am I going to live? Where are they going to send me? Who is going to pay for me to stay there? Who am I going to be living with? Who am I going to be volunteering with? Today I am volunteering and I'm here at the Networks project, where we have older members of the community come in and be taught how to use the computers and internet. It can be sort of, people can feel that it's not accessible because it can seem quite daunting, sort of modern technology. But you can come along here and it's a free session and you can have people who are competent with computers and internet help you, and you can have help with something, as you saw today, just looking at Facebook, so you can connect with friends and family.
They are being helpful and every one of them is easily approachable.
From an employer to see that I've given up 6 months of my life, moved away from home and just started this whole new thing, and I think it's worthwhile. So I'm experiencing management, leadership skills, teamwork, and it's just a fantastic thing to be able to write down on my CV. The reward is a self-satisfaction and of being able to help other people, and then it's very good for your self-esteem. One person, maybe they can't change the world, but they can genuinely make a difference to their community. can European Parliament support volunteer organisations and, most importantly, the volunteers themselves?
We can look at the issue of in-kind contributions in all European programmes so that the work of volunteers is taken into consideration as match funding. Volunteers can do what they want to do rather than raise money to run projects. We could look at the issue of insurance. While it's not a competence of the EU, nonetheless, good practice across member states to ensure that volunteers are protected. We can look at the issue of mobility of volunteers. Now, that is a competence of the EU to ensure that volunteers who want to go from one member state to another in order to carry out voluntary activities, that they can do this easily.
My name is Luisa De Amicis from Euclid Network. You mentioned in-kind contribution as one of your main points, and I was wondering if it would be possible for you, being an MEP, to do something effectively for this.
Volunteers do not take the place of paid work. And I know in some countries that's a much bigger issue than others. But on the other hand, good, decent work and volunteering are not mutually exclusive. I mean, and again, I think we need to look at this in a balanced way. Sometimes I get a sense that certain people think of volunteering as encroaching in some way on workers and on decent work and workers' rights. That's not what volunteering is about at all.
For more information on volunteering, visit europol.europa.eu.
Aceasta a fost Săptămâna Europeană. Vă aștept și săptămâna viitoare la aceeași oră cu alte noutăți interesante. Vă mulțumesc pentru atenție. Pe curând!